Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for joining this session. Just to let you know, as you may have seen, this session is going to be recorded so that you can watch back afterwards, and also anyone who wasn't able to attend can watch back afterwards. My name is Jim Harris. I'm a learning designer at the University of Northampton. I've been in the university for 21 years and I've been in this particular role for 8 years, and Liv has decided to go. No problem. So we might have some people joining as we go through, but what I'll do is I'll focus in on just carrying on with the delivery, if that's okay with everyone. So before I go into all my background, I just want to say thank you ever so much for facilitating. For those of you who are in the room, I'm so sorry I can't be there. As the picture shows, I had an issue with my windscreen yesterday, so I wasn't able to attend. So I massively appreciate the fact that you're allowing me to use the technology to support this session. What I'm aiming to do today is to give you a bit of an overview into myself, my role, then talk about some key debates. As a learning designer, one of my jobs is to work with academics and making sure that we use constructive alignment to align the learning and teaching activities that we do, such as this presentation, the activities I'm going to ask you to go through, with the learning outcomes needed. So rather than it being a completely disconnected topic, I'm hoping to go through a number of different aspects of different debates, but you'll see at the bottom of the screen in the footer, there'll be specific learning outcomes from this module that I've linked to. So hopefully I'll give you some examples of evidence of how I might be meeting those learning outcomes through this presentation. So for example, as you can see, we're looking at fun and gamification versus fun, then into inclusivity and diversity debates, and then I'd like to get some feedback from you, if that's okay, on some resources that we're involved with in a pilot project. So that will be something linked to implementation of technology within education. So once we've done that, it's your choice. We can either carry on going depending on how we do with time, and then you can leave early, or we can have a lunch break and then we can go into very specific applications of technology with education from my point of view, things that I've done where I was working with students. And if I move on to give a bit of my background. So as I said, I've been in this learning design role for 8 years. Just to say, if there's any questions, please raise your hand. If you're in the room, field them through David. If you're online, please post them in the chat. There are resources. I don't know if the presentation has been made available to you, but there's a Padlet which you can then post any questions to. So as far as wanting to work with me or send any questions to me, please use that facility either live in the session or you can use it afterwards. So as an example, that's kind of my background. I'm a bit of a techie geek. I came from e-learning development, delivering distance learning materials to different students, moved into IT management where I was doing everything from supporting people getting new technology, laptops, staff training, all the way through to using 3D cameras to capture different experiences and how that might be blended into an activity. So I've got a range of different overlapping experiences, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of those stories with you, some of those experiences, so you can get an idea of the context in which some of the theory, some of the debates actually influence the work I've done in the past as well as now. As I said, I'm a learning designer and I work across different faculties. So although I've got a technology background, I might be working with teams in nursing or education, or it could be psychology, or it could be computing science. And one of my roles was as an eSport tutor. So I had the opportunity to teach students, and I don't know if everyone is aware of eSports is competitive video gaming. We had students with a range of different abilities, a range of different reasons for joining the course, and it was my responsibility to teach them some of the boring but important things such as referencing, why is it important to reference, and talking to a student who is maybe just focused on playing games really well, the academic aspect is very difficult. So I really focused in, and that's what we'll look into later on today, activities that will engage those students and really trying to give them a sense of belonging, that yes, you may want to just come here and play video games, but actually the way that you approach that can be framed within theoretical principles. So trying to bring a bit of fun across into some of the more traditional approaches to academic work. Personally, my interests are technology, but I also love digging in the back garden. So archaeology is another big aspect for me, and I'm sharing this with you so that you get a bit more of a picture of the person who I am as a tutor, because that's obviously something that can be lost, it can be missed if I were to just talk at you through the slides. So I'm hoping to build up a picture of my experiences, who I am. On one thing I did forget, shouldn't ever forget it, but I'm a father of 2 teenage daughters. That is important for something that we're going to speak about this morning. Just a contextual background for that. David, yeah.
Sorry, Jim. I've put the attendance code up there for those who are here and those online. So if you can make sure you sign in. I'm just going to quit your session and rejoin it, because I'm going to turn, we've got an international student. I'm going to turn on the translation. Okay. Right.
Yeah, no problem.
With that, so I will be back with you very shortly. There, 821 81834. Okay. 821 81834. Yep. Yeah. I've wrote it down so I can read it out. Right. I'm just going to sign out and rejoin, Jim. Thanks.
Yep. Hi, Alexander. Sorry, Alexandra. Hi, Olivia. Alexandria, we're just in a. Oh, sorry, Alexandra. We're just in a pause at the moment. David is going to rejoin the session, but he's got captioning. He's going to enable captioning for an international student. What I'll do is, while we're waiting, I'll post into the chat the Q&A link. So if you've got any questions related to anything generally about learning design, or anything specifically about things that are covered in the session, please post them to that Padlet. I'm going to be monitoring it on the second screen. And there's also some feedback that I'd like to gather from you if you're willing to participate in it, which again can be posted there. Okay, I wonder if Sorry, David's just having trouble getting back into the session. Okay, David's just having connection issues. We'll give it a couple more minutes, and if he's still having problems, we may have to switch the teams. But as he was able to join earlier, hopefully it is just a bit of a Wi-Fi black spot in that room. Okay.
There we go. Sorry, Jim. I've just hotspotted my phone, so.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So I'll carry on if everything's okay. Have you frozen, David? Or?
No, that's good. Thanks. Cheers.
Yep. Okay, no problem. So just wanted to give you a bit of a background into who I am, and what I've also posted into the chat was how you can interact with this session. Obviously, it's difficult for us because we're in a mix of different modes at the moment. Some people online, you can raise your hand if you've got a particular question, but also there's a Padlet which you can either access now, you can go to it after this session and post some notes, and I'll monitor it and respond back. I was intending to be in the class with you, so I wanted to talk to you about the idea of a Zen clap as part of participation. Yep, no problem. I'll post it there. So the idea of a Zen clap may not work for those who are online unless you're willing to open up your microphone. But for the people in the room, and for David, the Zen clap is just audience participation, very quick polling technique. And it's simply based on me asking, have you heard of a Zen clap? 1, 2, 3. So because people hadn't heard of a Zen clap, I wasn't expecting anyone to clap back. But now, if I say, has anyone heard of a Zen clap? 1, 2, 3. I didn't hear any clapping in. Oh, there was one. Was anyone clapping in the class? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, but the Zen clap is just a single clap that we all do in time with each other in response to a question. So if I ask you, and if you are online, you can play along with this at home without having the microphone on. But if I say Zen clap, if you have an iPhone, 1, 2, 3. Zen clap if you have an Android phone, 1, 2, 3.
I'm just clapping.
Right. So the idea is that we can start anonymously getting some feedback on how many people. It sounded like there was more people with iPhones than Androids within the room. And if I say, who has a BlackBerry? Zen clap, 1, 2, 3. We know that there's no one who owns. Oh, someone has. No problem. I won't be using that a lot, I'll be using it a couple of times, so just be alert as we go through this. If I do say Zen clap 1, 2, 3, it's not quite getting the synchronicity, but
I'm used to having the mic off though, Jim, whenever I'm listening to stuff. So does that?
You can still clap along at home. These things are still relevant to you, and actually that gives you a bit more control over the narrative, because if I ask a question, do you agree with something, and we'll come into this in a second, do you agree with something, you don't have to clap, but it means that you've got an opinion, so you can start forming that opinion. As I'm saying, I'm trying my best with what I'm going to be presenting with you today to not just be transmitting information to you. I want it to be something where hopefully I'll get you to contribute some ideas, some thoughts about aspects, but don't feel that you have to, okay? This can be something that you can do just to help you understand and contextualize your learning from this. And so what I wanted to do now was say, who knows about Vygotsky? Zen clap 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got some. And now I'm going to say, who does not know about Vygotsky? 1, 2, 3. Brilliant. So straight away, I know that you've got a foundational knowledge of Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development. I wanted to talk to you about that because it underpins a lot of the things that we're going to be covering today. The image that you can see on the screen was generated by the generative AI within Padlet. And I love the fact that when I asked about the zone of proximal development, it represented that as something associated with learning. You can see the books on the bookshelf, you can see the office desk, and then in that center, it's got the idea of the comfort zone being the red dot in the center. Then you've got a zone of proximal development out towards the red, almost a signal for danger zone at the outer side of it. So when we're talking through this, I will always be thinking about that element of how far are we stretching knowledge? Are we getting to the point at which it's uncomfortable? Are we moving people out of the comfort zone? And that consideration about those things, really, when we're dealing with technology, and an example of that might be the first time that someone's ever put a VR headset on and thinking, what do I do? Rather than going to it with a clear plan that says, these are the steps and stages you should attempt, and how that zone of proximal development influences some of our decisions over technology. Okay. So hopefully this will play. I got massively into gamification. Zen clap if you're a fan of gamification. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Good. I want to play this video because for me, I saw this, and then when I heard about gamification, it instantly took me back here. So hopefully the video will play. If not, I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, I'm going to switch over to the other presentation.
Well, it's nearly 1 o'clock, and you know what that means. That's right. It's time for our field trip to the chocolate factory. I trust you all remembered to bring your permission slips.
Oh, what a day.
I'm gonna eat 8 pieces of chocolate. I'm gonna eat chocolate till I barf.
Oh, don't worry, Bart. We'll find something fun for you to do. Ah, here we are. There's a whole box of unsealed envelopes for the PTA.
You're making me lick envelopes?
Oh, licking envelopes can be fun. All you have to do is make a game of it.
What kind of game?
Well, for example, you could see how many you can lick in an hour, and then try to break that record.
Sounds like a pretty crappy game to me.
Yes, well, get started.
Okay, I'll stop that and go back to the presentation. But I hope you picked up from that idea of trying to apply a game to a boring task and how that was seen as gamification. You know, what the whole thing of see how many you can do in an hour and then do it faster. That seemed to be the original view of gamification. And I'm just going to bring back up the presentation. Here we go. So this may be difficult for you to see, but the slides will be shared with you. But the original idea was about efficiency in business processes. And I'm going to focus on the bottom one here. Components are the specific installations or instantations of mechanics and dynamics. And if I take us forward to what does that mean, you can see here some things that you will probably recognize from the interpretation of gamification: avatars, badges to unlock, boss fights, leaderboards. And this is where, when we try to think of those in the context of education, although digitally we'll be able to create great opportunities for students to do representations of themselves as avatars, how does that impact on the learning? How is that associated with the learning? These were intended as ways such as a leaderboard. Who is achieving the most number of boxes stacked within a certain period? And then what happens to the people who are in the top 10? Do they want to achieve that? What about the people who are in the top 50? Do they really care about that? Are they being motivated by that? And the aspect of, are you applying game mechanics because you think it will be fun over a boring task? And if I say it in that way, when we apply gamification to education, are we saying that the education can sometimes be quite a boring task, so we have to add a layer of fun over the top of it? Now, what I'm doing in discussing this is that I'm trying to frame the way that technology implementations, because we have the opportunity, because there are maybe pre-existing knowledges that students have about avatars because they're seeing on different handheld mobile games, for example. The idea of badges, that we've got this external reward. What I want to do is move that debate on to what we have more at the top. And if we focus on the use of games in digital formats and the way that we use technology to look at the dynamics of gamification, thinking about the constraints, accessibility. And a classic example is when we've got VR headsets, how does that support someone who may have visual impairments? Does the actual technology cause a barrier for us? So I wanted to just introduce the concept of shifting away from the traditional elements of gamification, but not losing sight of the fun in some of this. For example, the narrative. And the example I want to give you, I'm coming back away from the technology, but it's look at the learning outcome, thinking about analysing the current and emerging role of technology in facilitating and inhibiting education. Well, let's start with what might be the facilitators and inhibitors of education. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am a father with two daughters, and I've used the example a number of times. So I've got the details here on the screen. I'm going to read through them. So this was my attempt when I was looking at gamification to see whether or not I could improve the simple aspect of getting my daughters ready for primary school. All different types of motivations, incentives were tried, and nothing quite happened. The idea was that we get to leave at a specific time to make sure we can make the journey to school, get them to school at time, and the opportunity was to gamify the process. Now, thinking about the Universal Design for Learning framework, and we'll cover a bit of that later, the idea of using pre-existing knowledge, using pre-existing experiences, and using those as part of the process. So we liked watching the Crystal Maze. I don't know if people are aware of the Crystal Maze, but the idea was that there were specific zones And within those zones, there were particular games to play. And with those games, you won a crystal. And so the number of crystals you had then were totaled up into the final part of the game, whereby you would then have an opportunity to grab silver or gold, hopefully more gold tokens from what was called the crystal maze. So the concept was zones where there were different activities to complete, a prize for completing that activity, and then there was a final time that was allocated based on the number of you won that. Okay. So that's what I did. I created a zone for getting up and getting yourself washed and dressed for the morning, downstairs for breakfast and tidying away your things, going back up, brushing the teeth, but making sure that you did it within the requirements. So making sure that you didn't do it too fast, but making sure that you did your 3 minutes and you did every aspect of it. And then once those had been completed, you would win, whoever would win out of the two of them would win a unicorn, and then that unicorn could be used and played with in the time that was then saved. Once all the games had been completed, we could then play with those unicorns and then head off to school. So we kept on doing this for a week. And once we got the ideas, the competition started to come in. My daughters were really enjoying it, wanting me to do the speech, and I turned into a game show host for that period. And it worked. We were suddenly finding that the motivation was there to get the unicorns, to complete the tasks, and then realizing that there was a time saving because everything had been done so quickly. So a real element of having fun within the gamification. Now, what actually happened, then I found it really difficult to do the setup one day. So I thought, oh, I'll leave it. They know the zones, they know the tasks, they'll get on and do it. And the whole thing fell apart. And I said, why? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done what I know that you did yesterday? And my daughter turned around and said, well, there were no unicorns. And I realized that they didn't understand or didn't appreciate what the unicorns won them as far as time saving and time to have fun with the unicorns. It was the lack of fun within the process that stopped the motivation. And that's the danger with gamified systems, with gamification, whereby a student who is expecting to get those rewards for doing certain tasks, the moment there isn't that reward anymore, those tasks seem to drop into lesser priority. Students don't see the motivation, the internal motivation. When we come to think about education, the internal motivation, the desire to learn, has to be the foundation rather than an external thing that says you can get this. I mean, you may experience it yourselves, that is it about the learning around the assessment, or am I more focused about the actual grade I'm going to get? And that's where we have to consider, with implementations of technology, with bringing things to a point at which, yes, the technology of gamification is good. It's definitely there as a motivator, but if it's not engaged with, if it's not supported, if the student doesn't see the value of the thing that's being gamified, then you're not going to have the positive results that you're expecting. Okay, this is at least my opinions. So I wanted to move it on to a class discussion, obviously online. Feel free to post into the chat, in room. It might be, David, that I just aim this at you and we have a conversation, whichever way that you feel comfortable with engaging with this. But thinking about what elements of game and or digital games could meaningfully support learning. I'll give you a starter. Think about the narrative. Think about role plays. Any thoughts in the room?
Has anyone got any experiences of gamification? No? Nobody's, since you've been at university? No games used?
No.
Okay. For me, it
For
kind of
example,
links very much
go on.
links back to kind of just, you know, when I was a teacher of early childhood. But again, it was about enjoying the processes as opposed to just the outcome, you know. And if we could make the processes enjoyable, for example, like tidy up time is a classic one. You know, right, we're going to put a song on and you've got to, you know, we need everything in its place where it should go by the end of a song. And if you do that, you're going to get 5 minutes extra play, or, you know, that sort of thing. But in terms of a digital aspect, I suppose when I was teaching, I started to use countdown timers visual on the board quite often. I used to let them play Angry Birds on the interactive whiteboard at the end of the day as a reward. That was a massively successful kind of carrot and stick approach to any task in the day. But yeah, I'm trying to think of, yeah, carry on, Jim, sorry.
With that Angry Birds, did you ever have a situation where you didn't allow them to play it? And what was the response and reaction? And again, this comes back to that, is the reward of, at the end of the day, we get to play this stuff, but only if we've all engaged. Is that actually about the students engaging meaningfully in the learning, or were they just completing the tasks so that they then got the reward of playing Angry Birds?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I used to use Angry Birds a lot for all sorts of things, counting, timers, turn taking, you know, and so they might not have known directly what I was trying to scaffold through the use of it. But again, that comes back to the holistic nature of early childhood development. You know, we don't have clear-cut learning outcomes and so on. It's more of a holistic kind of development. Yeah,
absolutely. And then thinking about the facilitating or inhibiting education, it's making sure that when you are looking at the implementations of technology, that there is that support. Is it a reward at the end, or is it actually integrated? Have you scaffolded in other skills in the engagement with that technology? And that's very much what we'll cover over the next part of the session. So thank you for that, David. So the next part, Zen clap if you believe in learning styles. 1, 2, 3. Thank you for your honesty. Feel free to have a conversation with me on this, because the first thing that I'm going to say is, in my belief, learning styles are a myth because there is no empirical evidence to support them. The other aspect, as you can see from this title slide, and feel free to argue against me, but when we think about inclusion, diversity debates, when we're thinking about how students may believe that there are specific learning styles that are appropriate to them, that they are best supported in, but that we haven't actually got any data that states that, there is a link on this slide which will take you to almost the debunking of learning styles. And the reason I'm covering this is not to say that you shouldn't be aware of learning styles. It's more to say that learning styles are so prevalent, are so apparent within education systems, that we've got a lot of students who will come to work with us, either at the university or yourselves, when you're in practice, when you've got your role supporting students. They will have viewed learning styles. I prefer my content to be delivered to me in video format on a mobile device. Now, the thing that we are moving towards now is that technology is perpetrating this. If the majority of the content that you're seeing is in one format, such as it's in video format, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are tied into that learning style, and that learning style is the only approach that you might have. An example of that might be if people are feeling ill and they're being impacted by light, so they're alert, but they don't want to have their eyes open, they can listen to a podcast. the learning process is still going on, but we haven't now switched learning styles. It's just you're consuming that content in a different digital format. So thinking learning styles as a non-founded concept, but thinking more that students and yourselves have learning preferences depending on where we happen to be, it then opens up a lot more for us to start thinking about what the barriers might be, where the opportunities are for someone to try something a bit differently.
I think just to ask, how many of you have done a learning styles test that tells you that you prefer auditory, you prefer listening, or you prefer seeing, or you prefer doing? Okay, because that was the three kind of main styles. I think it's been perpetuated in education, primary, secondary, for a long, long time. So to question it is actually questioning a lot of teachers' beliefs that they've never really questioned themselves. You know, and it's kind of unpicking it, and it's not saying learning. I think learning styles in the whole just needs reforming, but thinking about learning preferences, and that our learning preferences can change depending on what it is we're learning. You know, how long we have to learn it, when we're learning, you know, whether it's first thing in the morning or last thing at night, you know, or whether it's in the week or weekends. You know, our learning preferences change based on the environment that we're in, and the task that we need to do. And that's where UDL comes in, because it kind of addresses, hopefully, wherever and however you choose to learn.
Absolutely. And perfect segue onto that next part about thinking not about I need to produce content for a particular learning style, but thinking about the range of different barriers that may be present of a student engaging with this particular technology. So am I making sure that captions are available with the video platform that I've decided to upload and share? Do I have a transcription of it? Thinking about those aspects to allow learning preferences to then take the dominant part of the delivery, rather than feeling that I've got to make sure that I've covered something for all the learning styles, is a better way of seeing the current debate. So again, looking at that learning outcome C, select and describe current debates. The debate on learning styles will keep on going, because as you say, it's so embedded, and dare I say it, it's kind of nice and easy sometimes to just put us into a box of saying, I'm this kind of person, I'm this kind of consumer, rather than recognizing that depends on the day of the week, depends on the emotional state I'm in, depends on the workload I've had to be doing outside of my course, that there are a range of different opportunities that people have, such if there's an emotional issue that a student has with engaging in a session like this, then no problem. I don't expect you to contribute and put your camera on and all the rest of it. You control the environment in which you're learning, rather than me saying, no, you must do it in these certain ways. So again, the opportunities for us to consider the learner and how best we can provide resources to them. Did you want me to briefly go over UDL, or are you okay with the fact that we are putting the who? That's the new guidelines. UDL 3.0, it brings in a sense of identity that was never there before. So thinking about prior experiences.
There's the interesting dialogue in primary and secondary curriculum at the moment. The differences between the taught curriculum and the learned curriculum. The taught curriculum is always higher, what's delivered, than the learned curriculum. And one of the things I've been talking about at this level of study is the applied curriculum. So how does the learner take their knowledge and then apply it to the context going forwards? And I think that sits very nicely with the UDL kind of approach and framework.
Yeah,
But that's only
absolutely.
in the last 3 months I've started having conversations around this.
Yeah, and something that I'm sure, and I've put it there as a do we want to discuss assistive AI and generative AI. David, I know you've got a big background in that. You've got a book out in case the students didn't know. But the question about whether or not the technology of artificial intelligence can provide more access, more useful ways of engaging, preparing content, or preparing engaging content than learning styles. So again, we're moving more into the how technology can support the learning process indirectly, but actually underpinned by theoretical principles such as universal design for learning. So as far as a modern debate where we've got students who may not be aware of the fact that actually, I know you don't like reading, or your learning style is more about visual than it is about textual, but you can put closed captions on so that if you're on a bus and you can't hear, or you want to listen to music and you just want to read, then that's another option for you. That it's not going to be a one-shot opportunity for you to capture this learning, that you can revisit it, that you can come back to it. And so things such as being able to have the AI generated captions that I think you had enabled, that is something that then widens out and broadens out the opportunity of engagement, rather than saying that we have to facilitate the learning style approaches and myths. So I hope I haven't kind of pushed too hard against learning styles, but really wanting to talk about how thinking about the fact that people may be trapped into certain views about their own learning styles, being able to switch it to learning preference provides us more opportunity to share diversity, for example, thinking about different case studies, or making a case study that is internationally focused rather than specific to Northampton, which may not necessarily get the same kind of input or interest from someone who may be an international student, who may be feeling that, how does this draw on my existing knowledge? Or is there already a barrier of me trying to understand cultural differences before I understand the content available here? So any comments on that? Because what I'm going to suggest now is a 5-minute break, and then we come back, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, they never say no to a break here.
That's
All right. See you in 5 soon. Thanks.
That's great. For those online, yeah, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, if we can start preparing again. We'll wait until David comes back into the room.
What other breaks do you have planned, Jim? Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head.
So the next session it was going to be about 30 minutes, and then it was a choice between we either continue on and I'll go through the implementation examples, or we can take half-hour lunch break at that point. So
Okay.
lunch in about half hour. How do people feel?
What do you want to do? So this is going to be about half an hour now. Yeah, and then we can either carry on, and that would mean finish a bit earlier, or have a break and then come back for the last hour. That would be. Is that what
Finish
people would like to do? They want to finish early? Yeah?
So
Okay,
clap,
yeah.
who wants to finish early? 1, 2, 3.
That was literally,
love it.
That was literally one student. That was, Jim.
Oh,
No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. It was, yeah, a few more than one.
I'm happy to do that. The people online, if you're happy to do that, if you can give me an indication through a thumbs up or raise hand.
Yeah.
We're getting pressure. Okay, no problem at all. All right, so we'll just plow on through. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So for the next part of this discussion, it is going to require you to provide some feedback to me, and this is because when I looked at the learning outcomes and thinking about the elements of influence on practice of technology, there is an organisation who works across all the universities and also further education colleges, called Jisc. And I don't know if you've heard of Jisc. I'm not going to go too deeply into the background of them, but they're a consultation type approach to higher education. And over the last number of years, they've been working on a project called Beyond Blended. And this was really starting to think about blended learning and how the use of technology supporting learning varies. So as you see here, and I'll read out the description. So the Beyond Blended project, which the university is now part of, is helping curriculum teams consider the pedagogic differences between in-place and online learning and the need to balance flexibility with specific needs of students. So obviously we've got the flexibility happening today because of a logistics issue. I wasn't able to attend for various illness issues. Other people weren't able to attend, but we've got this balance between in-class activity or in-class participants, online participants, and the need to vary the engagement, how we actually use the technology. Should I have used polling rather than using the Zen clap? Well, I don't know if people were in the room actually on a mobile device or not. So is that person now excluded from the activity because they can't contribute to the poll? Thinking about those aspects is really what this new project is about, and coming back to that idea of learning preferences. So I'll move on to the next slide. I've got a 2-minute presentation that's going to be from Sarah Knight, who heads up the team about this this particular project, and she'll just describe what Jisc are doing, and then we can start looking into the resources. So this is really about how technology is implemented within education across higher education. So I felt it relevant to spend a bit of time on this. I'm trying to justify it to you rather than just going, I want to play videos to you, but it's really so that you can understand what is happening, where those debates are leading into the influence over practice, certainly from my role, but also in other institutions in higher education and further education. So just going to switch screen. As I say, it's a 2-minute video. Okay, and should be able to hear.
So just taking that into representation, and we are creating, these are draft mock posters that Sheila McNeil has developed. But what we wanted to do was also try and show the ways in which students are learning and what might be happening. I'm speaking to you, with you in front of me. I have got our delegates online, but as well as listening, as well as being in this space, you may have a presence in another space as well. Some of you may need to be keeping your phone on to check any messages or emails in relation to your students or other aspects of the campus. Some of you may be actually messaging someone in Teams at the moment in terms of a work query or making a comment. So when we're in the physical space, we are also having a presence in an online environment. And of course, thinking about our delegates online today, they may be, sitting on their couch with a cup of coffee. They may be also having other applications open that they're engaging with, and likewise for our students. So we just need to be thinking about those conversations that we're having when we are thinking about designing our learning for our students. And of course, thinking about what we were saying earlier around the online spaces, there is not just one online space. We used to think of that as, they're just in our VLE. Well, perhaps they never were anyway, but the virtual learning environment, I think, has certainly evolved in terms of that environment, incorporating all different types of platforms, tools and technologies that are in there. Online collaboration boards, lecture recordings are also things that are being interacted with in a very different way. So,
okay, so just stop sharing at that point. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what it is that Jisc are trying to do. So moving from the concept of, let's go there, moving from the concept of blended learning between the stuff that we do in the digital space and the stuff that we do in the physical space. And so is this you sitting and taking notes maybe in a lecture compared to you posting comments to a Padlet, and thinking about the variety. This is broadening out, again, similar to the Universal Design for Learning guidance on the individual. What is the individual doing in those digital online spaces? And how are we supporting students in that? So there are some resources which they've produced, and so you saw that they had some images there. We've got the latest versions, and if it's okay, what I'd like to do in a short while is to share those with you and for you to give some feedback. How might we use these? So it's less about the technology implementation, but it is focused on how we're using technology in education and raising awareness of it. Okay, so that's the first thing I'd like you to contribute back to me, if you'd be able to. The next stage, and obviously the other thing I've tried to do is bring all these current projects, these debates, into a presentation so that that presentation is available to you on Nile in case it's something of interest to you, if it's something that might help with an assignment or just clarify your knowledge, or as I say, just out of pure interest. So the next part, there is a video link, but I won't go to it, is thinking about blended learning in the form of place, platform, pace, blend, flex, and support. So I won't read these to you, but again, when we are in a short while going to be going through and having a look and giving some feedback, is this useful for you? I mean, I could ask you now if anyone's happy to contribute. When you think about blended learning, is this kind of structure you're thinking about, or was it more focused on maybe one here, which is most learning has both in place and online, synchronous and asynchronous elements. Was that our only understanding of what blended learning is? I could ask over to you, David, thinking about those particular phrases.
I think at risk of simplifying it, I think during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we kind of simplified learning to on campus or online, even though as an institution, we tried to move towards a more blended approach beforehand. And I think now we are, I think we're still blend as such, but aspiring to get more flex kind of into the tasks and so on.
Yeah.
But the big thing here is about the independent side of learning, I think, on courses, you know, and actually the expectation of students to work independently outside of like face-to-face sessions, and that if that learning doesn't happen, it then has an implication on the next face-to-face session, if you're assuming certain things have happened or not. But no, I mean, I really like that, and actually it's giving me ideas for this module next year.
Well, that's going to be great to incorporate into the feedback, because that's the type of thing that Jisc are trying to say. How might we use these 6 pillars? Is it just because we have a discussion about how is it that you're using technology to support the students? Have you considered this idea of the flex? Because again, the flex is not about learning styles. The flex is about learning preference or learning availability or opportunity, because people may not be at the same time and pace as other people within the module. But was that?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
If I was to give you the option every week to do this hybrid, so meaning that I'm here every week in the classroom, but you can sign in to be online, would you always be online, or would you come some weeks and just see?
Yeah, alternate.
You'd alternate. And what would inform your decision about alternating?
I think that's it actually in reflection. But if like I can't attend, or like I'm busy or doing something that I feel like, especially if it's like, so for example, on Mondays when you have one lecture 9 to 11 and that's finished, like if I had the option to stay online, I need to do something, I would rather do that and come in for just 2 hours.
Yeah. But you can.
Yeah, I'd probably come in unless there's a reason I can't come in, I probably would.
Yeah.
There's other things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How would you feel about learning in session when some people are online?
Well, I do.
Okay.
Like we're doing it right now.
Yeah. I just think, but the expectation would have to be very clear around, although we're in session, we can still have our, you know, laptops on, the collaborating space on, so you can also engage with the students who are online and so on. Okay. Yeah, lots of ideas. Thanks, Jim.
That's all right. And I want to go back to what I was saying earlier about your contribution. So there is a Padlet here, but it's for you to decide if you want to, if you feel that you want to contribute, if you want to do it in the session or you want to do it outside the session. So thinking about how we provide you multiple means of engagement, you can raise the question, you can raise your hand, and then add a comment into the chat. There's no reason why someone in the room couldn't be on Collaborate and then be chatting to the people who are online, so that you've then broken that barrier between the platform and actually allowed there to be this blended conversation, blended cohort, blended feeling of we all belong here. We've not 2 separate populations of student learners. Some who are in the room because David's present, they feel that they're getting a better quality of experience just because physically they're in the room. But we have to make sure that we are providing you with the best learning experience, so that it's not, hang on, why is David showing us a 20-minute video, or Jim showing us a 40-minute video, pausing it every now and again to say, you know, what do you think about that? No comments, right, let's move on. Is that the level of learning that we're thinking about? I would say no. That's transmission of content with a facilitator, rather than actually active learning which comes back to the university's approach to active blended learning. The idea that you wouldn't be just doing blended learning, which is you can get the lecture in class or online, there may be a video of it, but it's about the technology that's the blend. The active was always intended to be active participation in the learning process, giving students the opportunity to put what you've learned into some kind of practical activity, which is where we'll move on to the next part of this, which is to look at, these are digital resources. Can you come up with some ideas? Would you be willing to share some ideas with me about, do you find these useful? Is it important for you, as David's saying, maybe in addressing, well, what is independent study? What am I meant to be doing? Should I be able to have my phone here and be on social media at the same time I'm on a session listening to this? Well, I'm okay, because as long as I'm understanding the basics, I can rewatch the video another time. And that being your preferred learning approach, rather than the university saying all mobile phones off, cameras on, all those horrible things that we heard, the story from the pandemic about ways that technology was being used to force presence, not engagement. I want to see that all my students are here. It's a very different thing. And actually, we know that there's going to be students who are going to be seeing this and we're not present anymore. As in, we're not available to give them instant feedback, instant responses. So again, I'm trying to give you some insight into the current debates, into the current ways that things are being expressed and explained as far as blended learning, to see that universal design for learning mixed in with the technology and with the opportunities that artificial intelligence provides gives us more opportunity for different learning patterns to happen depending on the preference of the student. And that's such a different thing from learning styles. It's really about being flexible to the ways that you are able to engage with your learning. So the next slide is just an overview of those images. So what I can do is I can put the posters on the screen and just work through them. If you've got digital devices in the room, then we can share a link so that you can actually have a look. Which way would you prefer to do it? Me show them on the screen and we just go through them?
Yeah, I'd go for that, Jim.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Go with me.
Yeah.
This is a bit of an open activity, because I don't want to lead it as far as we want to use these in this way. I want you to just give me your responses, your reactions. How might we use these to support staff, students in understanding that mix, that variety of different approaches and opportunities to engage with technology? So here we go. There we go. Okay. So you can see the first one. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to go through, actually, for the recording. I'll read out each of them. So in the center, we have an idea of a lecture theatre. So someone at the front of the class who is then broadcasting information out. The question here is, where am I during a live lecture on campus? So am I answering live quiz questions? So that could be something that we're doing as a poll. It could be something that we're doing as a Padlet. Am I online taking notes, or am I using some kind of digital media to engage with that, to maybe make some notes and say, we don't agree with Jim about learning styles? I'll have to have a look at that link later. Are we asking if anyone else is confused? Are we using kind of back channels to be open and honest about, I really don't know what he's talking about. I don't know how this relates. I don't see why this is important. And actually sharing that opportunity to say, no, I am on the right path. As a learner, I should be in here. So you don't have the sense of imposter syndrome, which is something I saw in the esports students, that they felt that there was a particular way that university should be, and that's not the way that they've learned. That's not the way that they thrive in the learning environment. So actually, can we adjust that? Shared groups based on the VLE? Have we got that opportunity to use the VLE to have those conversations? Online checking out resources and links. So the links I've been sharing with you, some of the people online may have been using those. So I've just broadly described each of those categories. These are posters. Is there any ideas? Anyone got any suggestions of how these might be useful for staff, for students?
Do you agree with these? Do you connect to them? Like the ideas around when you're in lecture, you know, do you have live quizzes? Do you spend most of it checking social media?
I mean, they're interactive, but...
Yeah. Is there anything that's missing?
I mean, the thing is, it's obviously talking about, I think, you know, what we have here is very different to that, because that's basically a lecture dicta. And in a lecture dicta, you don't, you know, if somebody in this class, if they don't understand something, they often teach us straight away, and the teacher will tell them what's going on, what it's explained to them. In a lecture dicta, you can't do that. It is a different, it's a different piece altogether, a lecture dicta. Yeah. So in some ways, that, I would say, yeah, it doesn't compare, I don't think, to what is at this university.
What's the next of this, though?
You get learning delivery, yeah.
You know, like in the, there's usually kind of tiered seating and there's a lecturer at the front, whereas we have much more kind of workshop-y approaches.
Personally, I do, yes.
I think that for lectures, you should be a lecturer, and for seminars, you should be in a room like this.
Why?
I feel like when you're in a lecture,
Can you hear this, Jim?
Yeah. If you could tilt the mic towards it.
That this could be serious.
No, but I don't feel like this is serious. I feel like this is reminds me of secondary school. Like I came to the university having the idea that I was going to be a lecturer, and I feel like that kind of adds more, because I feel like the expectations that are not met also brings down the seriousness of something that you don't like to see.
But sometimes expectations are just from dominant normative narratives that you're not actually questioning. Okay, so do you, if you're coming to university to learn as a big kind of idea, are you going to learn more in lectures or seminars? Okay, and actually for some people, the formal kind of idea of a lecture theatre is terrifying. Yeah, and actually makes them not want to go, whereas a more kind of informal environment like this, where people can arrive and come and go and ask questions and so on, might be more accessible. I think that the conversation here, Jim, is very much about, we don't really have lecture theatres here at Northampton.
Yeah, that was the biggest concern that we had about using these as a resource, that they do have that basis that, well, we don't teach in that. The idea of active blended learning and the reason why the Waterside campus was built in the way it was an intentional way to have a student-centered approach. And that meant that there had to be small group teaching where there can be that building up of trust, belonging, the associated aspects of learner-teacher relationship, rather than it being large number of people in a single space, a transmission of the information to those students, and then the expectations that the students will all be able to make notes of those that they can then learn from in consolidation afterwards. That
But
just really was. Yeah.
What Wendy's said is that there's also an expectation that university should feel different to secondary school or college.
Yeah. Where is the step
having
up in educational experience?
A big lecture theatre would feel markedly different to that. So actually, maybe it's not about one way or the other way. It's about, because I know where I'm an external examiner, they have lectures and then they go into breakout seminars to discuss things.
environment,
Yeah.
setting.
Okay. Yes, so the expectations are clearer when you're in a lecture theatre compared to when you're in a seminar room. Whereas here, because we're always in our smaller environment, sometimes it's a lecture, sometimes it's a seminar, and sometimes it's a mixture of other things. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that element of place and being in a place of learning that is, right, I'm in a lecture, I know how to study, because that has been something that we are very aware of, going back to the imposter syndrome. Almost no one told me how to take good notes. Should I write down everything that's being said, or and is it just rote learning? Am I just repeating back what you've told me? I'm not actually sharing an understanding of it. I'm just sharing the knowledge of it. I know what a thing is. I don't understand how it works, but I know what a thing is. So that relationship was an intentional aspect as well, that there was that opportunity for you to be able to stop the class if it's appropriate and facilitating the correct way and say, I don't understand that. Can you just repeat that? Whereas that can be lost in a lecture theatre because...
This comes back to what I was talking about earlier. I think the taught curriculum, the learned curriculum, and the applied curriculum. So because the first step of applying anything is learning it. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going on to the next one?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So where am I during a live lecture? Off campus. So we've got that currently happening. So it may be that you're at home caring responsibilities or whatever reason it may be. And then asking, and we can see there probably is going to be a difference. The anonymity, the ability to have the camera off, have the microphone off. It may be that you're checking your social media. It may be that that's for entertainment purposes, or it could be that it's related to family situation. But as long as you are engaging with answering the live quiz questions, and this comes back to how much of an involvement in the learning process do students have? Do you see that the learning is something that's happening to you? So as long as I'm in the room and the person is talking, I am taking notes. I'm not really applying it, but I am engaging with it. But actually, I need some tasks afterwards. If I'm not taking notes online, if I'm not going into the VLE, then is it just that I'm listening, watching along, but I'm not actually consolidating that learning? So do we build opportunities as educators to use the technology, to put those opportunities in, to allow engagement after the session, deep dive if that's a particular area you're interested in, clarification of a principle that was covered in a couple of minutes, but you were confused, but you didn't feel that you could reach out and speak to anyone else online when you're at home, and trying to think about how you use that technology to engage with your own learning. And that it comes back to that question of the step up to university. And I would be interested to know from the people present, do you feel that the education systems and the technologies you engage with, maybe at sixth form, were better and better utilised than the ones at university? Do you almost feel that coming into the university, sometimes it can feel like a tech downgrade because we're not using polling as much, we're not using these technologies that you've experienced before? Is there anyone who'd like to talk on that?
Did you use much tech at college?
No, it's not the same as what one is like. Tech, college was like secondary school, sixth form.
Yeah, and what sort of tech then? Was it polls and things like that, or?
No, it was literally just a Hyflex load.
Oh, okay. So yeah, not really interactive tech, not much experience, just PowerPoints, death by PowerPoint. Yeah.
Like writing lines, I've got proposed like in Post or something.
I think you've got to be careful though, you've got to be very careful that you don't, that if you use too much on online material, then you've got to be different to a university, which is cheaper. So rather than coming to a physical building from here because I don't actually have that interaction and I'm to be able to speak to.
Yeah.
So I think there's
Back to learning preferences, isn't it?
well, it is. This is, yeah, I know, but this is obviously a physical university.
Yeah.
We'll be very careful when sort of like a physical university is going to embrace technology that they don't remove the difference between them and open university because these students will think, well, I'm not going to pay that much money for something effectively that's far too similar to open university. I think there's a balance to be had because you come here, you pay more because you do get teachers in person and you do get to share with other students. So,
Yeah,
we learn a lot. I mean, I know I've learned loads from these students.
Yeah.
Loads. And I wouldn't have done that if that's why I wanted to come here. I mean, you know, I've also known people around me at home, but I've come here and I've learned so much from these guys. I really have. And I would not have had that if I don't have university. We would not be the same. Like, we don't, you know, they don't. I don't think they've probably chatted to me in the same way. I just been the face of an older person online.
Yeah, I mean, we do deliver purely online courses as well.
But that's the choice people are making when they book them, isn't
Yeah.
it? Is kind of, you know.
Yeah. But there's, I think, with the technology side, and this is where I try to come from, a big part of this module is broadening tech skills, because going into professions, there's a certain kind of expectation around digital literacy. Yeah.
Yeah. You've also got to be able to, but I suppose where I also have got to be socially good and be able to relate and speak to many different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need the technical side, but you also need the social skills as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Absolutely, and the social side of education, the change that has happened since COVID, for example, the feeling of isolation that some people felt from distance learning programs, well, that was then something that students were exposed to. What does it feel like to have to build up your own personal learning networks through your friends, because the technology has enabled you to remotely learn, but it hasn't enabled you to remotely connect meaningfully with the kids. So that if you are, you know, who is the person that you turn to when you're confused? Is it something that happens in the lunch break? Is it something that happens when you're having those discussions? That's all the part of almost the campus experience, the place at which you have those discussions. Showing someone the assignment brief on a mobile phone and saying, does that bit make sense to you? Is a crucial part of the learning process, because you had a query that could impact your ability to successfully complete the assessment, and you turned to a peer to have some understanding. And I would hope that if that were to be fed back to the academic, then there might be other people who are also having that same issue. So rather than it being an email conversation, a one-to-one relationship, very good point. Is it okay if I post this to an FAQ? Can I just send out an announcement to clarify this? In fact, it's a lot to explain, so I'll record a video of myself responding to that, but making it available to everyone, so that everyone can use the digital aspects to engage, even if they are at home, even if they're at a distance. So moving on to another one of these the posters. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'd just be interested to know whether or not you found these useful. Do we think we might have to have a facilitated discussion between students and staff? Is this something that maybe a video overview, thinking about, you know, this, where am I during personal study time on campus? Are you finding yourself a space where you feel safe, warm, and you can sit and listen to recordings? You can maybe engage with the pre-work, you could do some research, you could read an article. Thinking about this, I'm not quite sure how, you know, if we were to put this up as a poster on the wall by the grounds, for example, I'm not sure how useful it will be. What are your thoughts?
Do you all know where you study best and learn best? And does it depend on what you're studying or learning.
Yeah, if I'm not interested, then it takes me forever to get into it.
Okay. So there needs to be a hook, kind of an interest that gets you there. So for example, you've just done an essay for this module. How would you feel if I'd said there's no essay titles, you write your own essay title?
Yeah, that's impossible.
Why is it impossible?
Why am I writing my own essay title?
Because you know what the learning outcomes are.
No, but I'd rather have an essay so I know what I'm writing about than just.
Well, you're writing about technology.
I mean, if you gave me like maybe like a pointer, like, oh, you could do like this. Yeah. I feel like after a while. Yeah. But I also feel like I'd lose track.
Okay.
Because I know what my brain's like. It's a bit of a messy place. So God knows what I've come up with. For example, open assignment. It's basically like talk about policy. Like the fact I don't know what policy I'm doing is just. I don't want to do it, you know, because there's nothing to. Yeah, there's no. I don't feel it.
But this is where, if I was to say write your own essay title, say right, what you know, potentially what have been your experiences with technology? What would you like to do in the future? And actually, where does technology sit with that? You know, do you want to kind of develop your own understanding around it? Because if you don't, you know, well, that's on you, not me. You know, we're doing a module around technology, but bringing different experiences and different ideas to it. But I also understand that not having an essay title, when you're so used to being given essay titles, can sometimes be a big shift, if you know what I mean.
It can also be a barrier. Lovely friend, I've worked with a lot of people who use a case of just giving them a sentence starter, and then they'll just fly. And in some ways, the title actually is a bit like a sentence starter. And I think that can make a massive difference. I think, you know, in research, they may have all the knowledge and the capability to say, but without that sentence starter, there's a complete block and a barrier. So I think if you were going to say, right, choose your, these are the outcomes, I think you'd have to be very mindful. For some students, they need that sentence starter, otherwise it's going to be a variable.
Yeah.
And that's very, very typical for divergent students as well. So, you know, without, you know, it can be very typical for divergent students, because actually it's sort of like overwhelming. And executive functions and all these different things. So yeah, without that, so you'd have to be very, very mindful that for some students that would be beautifully.
Yeah. But it would be a framework into the, like, this is how you develop an essay title. Think about, you know, X, Y, and Z.
But even then, some of them may
and all that. Yeah.
Otherwise, you could have like the whole, yeah, that could be, you know, as I said, it shouldn't always be a case that students have to work much, much harder. I mean, because that's what that way you see. You've got to be very careful.
Yeah, but also back to the point of the risk of saying this is your essay title, is then you then disinterest the student straight away. They go read it and go, well, I don't know that.
Well, what Wendy Morton, what I heard Wendy say is that she's not sure which policy, so possibly she just needs more guidance in finding a policy of interest stuff. Yeah. It's also much not the actual whole topic, it's she doesn't know what policy she's doing, therefore. So to me, that's kind of where I would start with, you know, okay, you're not sure what policies, what interests you, what policies you like.
Which comes back to the interest,
Which comes back to the, So, and also the fact that some students need a bit more
guidance than others. Okay.
And when you're saying you're coming back to the interest, I instantly thought there were no unicorns. It's that thing of what is I know the process. I know I've got to do all these things, but for some reason I haven't been sparked the interest.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the hook? What's the purpose?
Yeah. Why should I be invested in this thing? And what David is describing is something we would say, well, we don't know what you'll be interested in, so we'll give you complete freedom to choose the area. But in doing that, that gives you that difficulty of, but I don't know if I'm doing the right things, if I'm on the right lines, and am I meeting those learning outcomes in the way it was intended. It's just fascinating. Yeah.
That's it. But that's similar to what we do with the dissertation, is that that's exactly what we do with the dissertation will be as choosing what we want to go into further.
And actually, and the idea is to introduce it, because we have quite a lot of guidance around assignments. Other subjects have very little guidance. And sometimes I think students come unstuck at level 6 of their thesis because they've been so reliant on guidance. So I'm trying to kind of test the waters really with actually, could this potentially next year be an essay title 3, assignment saying to students, this is why it's happening, because this is coming next year, and this is your first kind of attempt at developing something that you're interested in. So again, that comes back to purpose and making students realise, see value in the process.
Yeah, which again,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Fascinating, and certainly that to bring it into the technology in education, there is the opportunity for us, and as a learning designer we are looking into how the university might offer students the choice between, is it an essay or is it a video essay? Do you not have a learning style that is more about you prefer written work, but more about would you have a preference over whether or not you talked through to a phone and actually recorded a 20-30 minute presentation on the phone, not even a presentation, as long as you're making reference to your research, you've done all the background effort, you've put the same amount of effort in as someone else. It's just that you haven't had to learn the process of writing an essay, constructing it in a certain way. And that is the ultimate ultimate aim for universal design for learning. You choose the mode in which you represent that you understand a thing. We don't force that technology on you and say, you must do a video of this, knowing that some people are good and some people aren't, which comes back to how much support is there for learning it in a way. I'll give you all the support I can. I'll give you the instructions. It's not just make a video and then someone panics about setting up a YouTube account. I don't know if I'm conflicting with David on things, and we're going to have one.
I introduced Kaltura to them last week because the implementation plan is a recorded video.
Yeah.
And purely to look at the skill of using it and uploading it, and it's prompted a few issues and challenges, but that's exactly why we've done it now. And I haven't just left it to students to sort it out themselves.
And you just helped me create this. I'm going to quote you later.
Yeah. Yeah. So
wonderful. Well, moving into implementation. So thank you for your feedback on that, and I'll extract what I can from the recording if it's okay. I'll anonymize it, so there's no way that those comments will come back to you. But it was a fascinating kind of journey through a conversation around those resources, and it would be good to maybe come back to yourselves at some point and see if there's anything further you might want to contribute. So the last part of the session is really about the implementation. So giving you an insight into some activities that I've been involved in, and it does link in with a couple of the things that were discussed earlier about the scaffolding of skills. Hopefully you'll be able to see what's on the screen here. I did set this up so that you'd be able to produce your own versions of these. But the idea was that I wanted to get students used to using Padlet. So in the same way that David was teaching you Kaltura, how can I make it a fun activity that is something that starts setting the scene and the expectations of how students would contribute throughout the module. So the idea here was to, as you can see from the purpose, and I don't know if you've heard of Etivities, Zen clap if you've heard of Etivities. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so maybe a couple. The idea of an Etivity, and that's maybe something we can explore a bit further, but it was a way of setting out tasks in an online environment that meant that students would have consistency in the activities they were being asked to produce. They had all the guidance, all the support, but that there was something meaningful afterwards. Now, I spoke right at the start about constructive alignment. Can I get a Zen clap if you know about constructive alignment? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I can do a very brief intro into into constructive alignment. This will require you to put your hands together. I encourage those online to do it as well. Put your hands together in triangle on your face.
I'll put you on big on the board so we can see you.
Yeah, no worries. So Biggs and Tang came up with the concept of constructive alignment. And what we have is we have a triangle. At the top, we have our learning outcomes. Off to the side, we have our assessments. And then the other side, we have our teaching and learning activity. Learning outcomes, assessment, teaching and learning activity. The idea being that in order for us to support our students to get evidence in the assignment to meet the learning outcomes, there's teaching and learning activities that need to be aligned to both the learning activities, the learning outcomes and the assessment. So an example is, if I'm asking you to do group work and spend a lot of time in group work, but I haven't got a learning outcome that's associated with group work, and my assignment doesn't make use of any of that group working skill, I'm being asked to do things that I can't see the benefit, the reason, what's the rationale? How does this contribute to my understanding to support the assessment? So constructive alignment is about thinking about the tasks, the technologies, the way that we present the information in our learning and teaching activities, and how does that contribute to the assessment? Because the assessment should be aligned to the learning outcomes. So another example might be an assessment that is poorly designed not to meet the learning outcomes. So it might be, and I might be getting into some dodgy territory here, make a video, and then I've got a learning outcome, and nothing in the learning outcome talks about any kind of digital assets or development of digital skills, communicating in different formats and so on. So that is where, as a learning designer, we're always looking for, is there that alignment? Because then naturally you will get the buy-in from the students. It's not about making it fun, but it's about a line of sight between, I can see the reason I'm doing this. I can see why you've asked me to do this small part of this task, because it's supporting my development in a different way. So the first line of the activity, the purpose of it, is to understand image copyright and for students to work with Creative Commons licensed content. Boring, but important. Less so now as well because you've got AI, but how can I add some fun into that? And so the idea was to just share links and for students to be guided to click on these links to find an image that then goes with the phrase university is. And university is will be the top text of a meme. Now, some of you may like memes, some of you may hate memes, some of you may never have developed memes, but this is the task. Go to the website that's linked there, upload your image, put the text at the top that says university is, and then you choose what the bottom text is. So it's just a bit of fun, personal. There's no right or wrong. It's just do this, get the image, and then upload it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to show you what was
highlight there. Do not use any rude or abusive words.
Absolutely, set the conditions and auto anticipate the crowd. So I'm going to share with you what was produced. I want your feedback on it because we won't be able to do the task. So thinking as along the lines of a tutor, I've set up this activity and this is the responses. Okay. So what can you tell me about the cohort of students who have contributed to this? Any observations?
Can you read them, or are they a bit small?
Can't read them. Okay.
I've zoomed in. No, I've zoomed in, Jim. You don't need to. Really zoomed in now.
Remember what the task was. Creative Commons images, going to put them into a meme that's going to have top text as university is and bottom text whatever you think you want.
What's Valorant?
Waiting for Valorant to add the replay system.
What's Valorant?
I don't know.
Is that a game? Is it?
So that tells us that student didn't follow the instructions.
Yeah, bottom
It tells
text.
us that they engaged with the activity, they posted to the Padlet, but we don't know if that's a copyright image, but they haven't followed the instructions. The feedback that I gave to the class was then, look, university is, these top ones with the ducks, university is.
Yeah.
These are the clear guidance, and then whatever they put in. And so for me, I told the students, when you're reading your assignment brief, follow the instructions.
We're just laughing at the university is exactly £4.40 on Tuesday at the St John's car park.
And then look underneath it, they have correctly referenced the image as well. I gave them the guidance on it. Some people did, some people didn't. But brilliant. And so we had a laugh. Some people had seen these things and other people hadn't. But it shows you just the use of technology actually broke some boundaries. The ducks was because, as one of the students has said, Jim told me not to post a picture of a keyboard with a duck on it, because I told them, you choose whatever image. I don't want to see pictures of ducks on keyboards. So they then decided, that sounds like a laugh, let's go and find ducks on keyboards. And that's it. They followed the instructions. They completed the task successfully. Other people didn't engage, but it gave me an opportunity to say, now I know if you've posted here that you've posted to Padlet. You've learned that skill. It wasn't a task of actually getting you to post to Padlet, but you've learned that skill through a bit of fun. Plus, we've had a bit of fun because I've actually shown you all of these in class and framed this particular activity in terms of preparing for the assignment, using images and understanding copyright, following the task, not just posting up anything. The very, very interesting split is that I did this in class, but also had it as a post-sessional activity, but it was also a requirement that they were to include their meme on the first page of their assignment. So it was a formative activity, but there was a component. You had to do it. You had to complete the task because it's going to be part of your assignment. And so that was a way of me supporting the students, saying, engage with these tasks now because they're going to be included in the assignment.
So what happens if they didn't include it in their assignment? Was it an automatic fail or was it noted in their feedback?
It was noted in the feedback to say there was a requirement for you to include your meme activity from week 2. Make sure you engage with the activities. So they didn't get marked down, but they got feedback because it represented to me, definitely this student who's got a university is a duck on a keyboard. I remember that. That is something that they have followed the instructions. Even if they had a meme that wasn't about university is, I would say, be sure to check the detail of the tasks that you're being required to do, because some people just put memes up unrelated to the actual topic. So if they're doing that for a fun activity, they're more than likely to do that for a more serious activity, skip over certain instructions that are quite clear, but they're not really participating fully with it. Okay, was that useful? I just thought these might be interesting ways for you to see how I incorporated technology in education, but not in that gamified way. I've got 2 more examples to go through, but it's about thinking about the underlying skills. Is it the thing that we're teaching, or is it around the skills to develop the thing that we're teaching? Is it an opportunity for us to use technology in a subtle way, giving flexibility to the students? You choose the picture, you choose the way, but I want you to do this. I don't know, David, for the instructions for your video upload, is it a very specific video or is it a video of anything?
The practice video was meant to be 2 or 3 ideas that they've got for the implementation project.
Okay. So there's
Yeah.
It's less about, whichever the format of the technology you find easiest or most comfortable, think back to Vygotsky, because that's the biggest thing with this technology. If I were to just say, post up an image that has been, copyright, that's got Creative Commons on it, there's going to be a lot of students who are going, I don't even know what Creative Commons means, let alone know what the technology is. So that zone of proximal development has massively shifted. Adding in a bit of fun and having the students talking about ducks on keyboards, that then broke over part of that barrier, because actually I can do it. And after the first couple were posted up, they saw that the rest of the cohort could do it. And if they hadn't posted, and there was loads and loads of them, am I falling behind? Actually, going back to what we said, no, it's just about the point at which you chose. Did you do it on the night you were writing up the assignment in week 11 and think, oh my goodness, I need to put the meme in, I better go and do that task now? You can still complete it before the deadline. It's just they chose a different time in which to engage in that activity. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the second of the three activities now. Second of the three. So this was again an example from what was called Ready Player One, academic and professional skills, and it was about trying to work with students who had a mixed variety of motivations. There was some students who had been coaching online for 2 or 3 years through the pandemic, and they wanted to formalize their experience into a degree because they wanted to become a professional esports coach. So you had people who had that clear idea, and then there were other students who didn't know what to do next, and their parents said, you've got to go to university, and they liked playing a football game called FIFA, and so they decided to join this course because they could go to university and play FIFA. We've got two different levels of motivation happening there. We've got some students who really want to go for everything. They will really succeed no matter what we try and challenge them with. And you've got students who it's a challenge for them to actually come to class. And that motivational aspect is where I had to start thinking about that element of fun, not gamification, but fun. This doesn't look fun. This is a template CV. But behind this, the idea was that the CV is framed around the university's recognized graduate attributes. So the university frames our learning outcomes, and you might have seen this on the module specification, employability and change maker. And those are generic skills that can be transferred across lots of different modules and topics. Things such as communicating in a range of different, in a variety of different medias. So can you do it as a poster? Can you do it as an image? Can you do it as a video? The ability for you to network, self-management. We have got these as core principles when we design our learning outcomes. So I thought I needed to try and support the students in understanding that they come to the university with a huge wealth of experience to draw on. And with these particular students, the common aspect was they liked playing video games. So I asked them to think of a game that they've showed leadership in. And notice it says game here. It doesn't say video game, it doesn't say digital game. It just says game. So I want you to start thinking of a game that you've played where you showed leadership, where you showed organisation and action plan, where you showed self-management, where you showed communication. And the idea was for you to then think back to games and fun. And where is there that skill that I had? I know what it is. I led a particular sports group. Well, that's my experience. That's you and your past. That's the person as part of universal design for learning. Draw on your prior experiences and construct it into a framework that the university has, and recognizing You come to this university with that wealth of knowledge, and actually some of that can be found in fun. So organisation and action planning, it might be that you've got a very specific game, that it might be Sudoku. How am I going to organise my, not organise my characters, but how am I going to organise my numbers? What's my next step? What's the action planning for the next part? Self-management. I had someone who put Jenga in there. And Jenga, for those of you who don't know, is a block game, traditionally with wooden blocks. You have 3 blocks, and then another layer of 3 blocks, another layer of 3 blocks on top of those. And the task of each player is to remove one of those blocks without the tower falling. So the self-management came in as far as I am cautious and careful about the moves I make in Jenga. That's perfect. It's a way that the student has realized these elements of the learning outcome into their own experiences, not learning outcomes being some disconnected thing that I don't know what that means. How does that relate to me? Communication within a game. Think about that. Is it the fact that you play certain games that require communication as a key skill? So this was a way, I'm hoping you're seeing that actually this helped the students understand a lot more about their own experiences that they bring to the learning environment. But the point of this was actually more about their digital skills. So this was a Word document that was on the Nile site. And the idea was the students had to download it from the Nile site. They had to save it to their OneDrive area, and there were links and guidance into uploading it to there, complete it on that OneDrive, and once they completed it, submit that document to Turnitin. Once they'd submitted it to Turnitin, I was then able to say to those students, you've now been through a test submission. The boring bit was dealt with. That was the task. The fun bit was in the memories that students could think about. The challenge of thinking, what does self-management mean to me in a game that I've played? What is communication? The number of people who put, I had terrible headphones, so I bought some more headphones. Yeah, okay, that's kind of collaboration and communication. That's not quite what we're trying to get at here. It's more about the skills that you've got in communication. Oh yeah, well I tell everyone what roles that they're meant to play in the game. Perfect. Rephrase it. Don't be descriptive, be reflective. So this again was introducing study skills in a way of saying reflective writing. Maximum of 20 words. Please, the word count. The word count was so important, and being able to, in an early stage, say to students, it says there a maximum word count of 20 words and you wrote 200. Think of that when it comes to your assignment, because you do have word limits on your assignments. So don't spend huge amounts of time and effort writing stuff when actually I just want a small summary. And actually, I know it's going to be challenging to squeeze it down into those 20 words, but that's the skill. Again, none of this is fun, but actually the subject that they're drawing on is where the fun came in. So I hope that's given you another idea about the implementation with this. It's very basic digital skills, or what I would consider basic digital skills, as far as being able to amend a Word document and submit your work, but actually brand new learning for those students. So making sure that we embed the process, that doesn't become the thing, that the focus is on the fun and the process can then still fit in. For me, this was a really interesting way of having that technology implementation. How do I get interest from students into actually working with Word documents, into reflective writing, into submitting their assignments? The final thing I want to say about this, and if there's any questions, then please do speak up or post them to the chat. The final thing with this was that students asked me, could I submit mine? You know, they wanted to know a bit more about me. I said, yeah, once everyone's done theirs and I've given feedback, I will then, because that was another thing, I provided feedback to the students so they knew where to get feedback from. This is in week 2 of the module, first semester, first year. What I said is, you submit the stuff, I'll do the feedback, and then I'm going to upload mine. We'll work through it. So I went into the class the next session, brought up mine, said, there you go. There, I just want to use my template, and I'm going to contextualize the feedback about, look, I went over the word count here, so really be aware of that word count. Look, I really didn't answer the question. This isn't evidence. This is a description of what self-management is. It's not an example of where you've had experience of it, where you've articulated the evidence of it. So getting them to do that, it took them 5 minutes before one of them said, hang on, I wrote that. And then someone else went, yeah, I wrote. And then they realized I hadn't written any of it. I just copied and plagiarized from all of them, put them into this, put it up, and then it was an opportunity for me to say, now what have you learned about me from what I've submitted? And they said, nothing. You've submitted the thing, you finished the work, you've copied other people's work, but we've learned nothing about you. That's not your evidence. And I said, yeah, absolutely, it's not my evidence. So then we had a discussion about plagiarism, that it's not about filling in the boxes, it's about you representing yourself. Provide your evidence. And I thought that was an important way of showing the interconnected nature of it. And I told them afterwards, look, you've achieved this, working with Word documents, understand your OneDrive, your digital sharing areas, you've understood how to submit your work, you've understood how to get electronic feedback, you've understood how to customize these, how to do reflective, all of this stuff. I haven't taught you those set tasks. I've given you an activity that covers those tasks for you. So that's why I want you to engage, because it shows that you've got the skills, you've got the abilities. It's just that we need to have that hook of that little bit of fun. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the final section. This is something that David and I have worked on. David, you did work on Chest House, didn't you?
No, I wasn't on this one. I've just heard lots about it.
Right. So I showed you some pictures at the start, and I said about the fact that I had a love for archaeology. I live in a place called Irchester, which is near Wellingborough, which is just to the east of Northampton. We have a Roman village down in Chester, in Irchester, called Chester House Estate. I don't know if you've had a chance to visit it. If you've been to Rushden Lakes, then you would have driven past. If you've been to Rushden Lakes from Northampton, you would have driven past Chester House Estate. But it is a Roman site with over 10,000 years of history. I'm not going to geek out on that side of it, but what I do want to geek out on is the fact that we always wanted to do some form of collaboration between the university, specifically the education team and our computer game design team, and the University of Leicester and Chester House Estate. And so the idea was to build an augmented reality app that was based on a trail. And the idea was that using the map, using the trail, you could go to a specific spot, you would see this camera icon, you would click on the camera icon, and then it would load a picture for you. So the example we've got in front here, got the map, we've got the location, and then we've got the picture of that location, but from a previous period. The gaming students also developed a range of different assets. So they 3D modeled from the game environment a temple, a Roman temple, based on the size and shape of one that we know would have existed there. Obviously, we know that the floor space, because that's the only thing that's left. The rest was an interpretation. But the idea was, rather than just seeing a Roman field with nothing in it, that the app would allow students to come, visitors to come, and to see a bit more about the history of the place. So thinking about the implementation side of the technology, about this learning outcome, identify and explain the ethical considerations, introducing new technologies into educational settings. I wanted to finish off the session by just having a chat, having a discussion around how do you think you might implement an augmented reality app like this for on-site learning. We'll start with that. So maybe it's a school visit, maybe it's something like that. How might you use that app?
Can I just clarify, does everybody know what augmented reality is?
No.
Yeah? No?
No.
So it's like when you
if you'd like me to explain it, yeah.
Yeah. And so you look through your phone, you know, and it puts kind of images onto where you're looking through. A bit like Snapchat filters are a form of augmented reality, aren't they,
Yeah,
Jim? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So, but you can use it for kind of educational purposes. So for on-site learning, if you were to take a school trip, you know, primary school children there, first of all, they'd all need their own devices or access to a device.
Yeah.
And what might you ask them to do?
Huh?
What might you ask them to do once they get there? Yeah? Yep, scan codes, find information. Primary school children always love a scavenger hunt. You know, like you've got to tick them off. There's like 6 things you need to find around the site. But yeah, like Pokemon Go sort of style. Did you have things like that, Jim? Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll switch over to a different presentation that has got some more of those, but those screenshots. But thinking of that fun, what is it that they're already used to? Does everyone know what Pokemon Go is? Do we make assumptions that everyone understands it? The same way that I made the assumption just now about augmented reality, not realizing that there needed to be some clarification on that. So some of the ethical considerations around that might be the fact of, do the students know what they're doing, or is this the first time they've been given the device? Are we clear in the instructions that we want to give them? Going back to that EDU2033 structure, what is the purpose of giving them an augmented reality app? Is it just right the way back to the start, the kids in the chocolate factory, just off they go and they're going wild, but it's uncontrolled fun? Or is it more the controlled fun of, right, everyone's got to follow in sequence and go here, here? You might want that if it's appropriate. So thinking about the implementation of this as a fun activity, is it really something that's fun? Is it something that may exclude some students? Is it, and thinking about the technology, the fact that the device or the app only has English text? And that, is it pitched at the right level? So actually, is the text here aimed at more mature adults rather than it is 6 or 7-year-olds? Is the technology appropriate to the target audience? So that was the challenge that we had with this app, thinking that who is it we're trying to build the technology for, rather than it being a let's build the technology and then leave it to people to deal with the implementation. So that's something to consider when thinking about technology implementations, not just the ethical considerations of, are we excluding certain students from this? Do we expect them to have prior knowledge and experience? Do we have the technical support of the institution? You've got 20 kids. Do you need 20 devices? Who's going to bring them to the site? How is that going to be managed? One of the things that we had with this particular project was the fact that there was a big view of, we need VR. We need it to have VR. And I was saying, but how? Where? Thinking back to the place and the pace. How long should someone, if we've got the headset, how long should we allow someone to have the headset on for? 5 minutes? 2 hours? Well, how are we going to manage that? You're going to have someone there who's going to have to say, sorry, your 5 minutes are up. Hang on, that's the end of any fun. If you've been to any kind of event where someone says, that's it, you had your 5 minutes, off you go. So we had to consider the fact that with that one headset, what if it breaks? Suddenly the whole experience is gone. So having to consider how you're going to sustain interest in the resource of technology and what the dependencies are on the technology. Have you got members of staff who have never been there before? So they're trying to do all the health and safety aspects while the kids are running around doing whatever they fancy doing at that point, whatever we've allowed them to do. I just want to show you that presentation. Bear with me. So I'm going to come out, and I just want to turn it over to you. Thinking about technology, because I'm not quite sure with the assignment that you've got, whether or not you're looking at technology implementations, but have you considered the ethical aspects of the implementation, the accessibility requirements that we might have? The fact is that with that site, there is wheelchair access, but not all the spots are accessible by a wheelchair. So by its own design, it's excluded certain people. Any comments on that? Or have you got ways of thinking about those?
Yeah, we haven't looked at ethics in detail because I only introduced that assignment last week, but that's
okay.
We'll pick up on. Yeah, we introduced the assignment. But it's and again, there are kind of overarching ethical principles that we want you to consider, but depending on what the project is and how you're choosing to use technology, it will impact on how you talk about the ethics. Cost is always a huge ethical consideration, you know, because that leads to inclusion, exclusion automatically. Maintenance of technologies, which can be linked into cost, but resources as well, can be one of them. And then obviously the data that such devices collect, you know, whether people have to sign up and all of that sort of stuff. And the age groups that you're thinking about, you know, if you come up with an implementation plan for, you know, university students, then obviously they can sign up themselves. But if it's under 18s, then potentially you need to make additional ethical concerns. We will cover this in session at some point.
No problem. So I'll just show you briefly. So this might be where, after me bashing gamification at the start, that we actually start seeing that gamification as a motivator for this particular aspect. How do we encourage people, participants with this technology, to actually go to all the spots? And so therefore we have this series of unlocks, but also a series of collectibles, which again, you can hopefully see the difference in the motivations that have been going on. This extrinsic motivator to go around, to follow the path, to unlock all the items, to then be able to access the information related to that item, compared to the more intrinsic motivator that I would have said with the other activities, where the fun was the thing that drove you on. It wasn't the final, I can now sign off the fact that I got all these academic skills. It was more, I had fun doing that activity. Yeah, and I can see that other people had fun doing that activity as well. And so that element of motivation that comes through, it is a balance between thinking gamification will be the sole way to get everyone motivated, but actually it may be the barrier. It may be something where people say, I don't like playing games. In this situation, thinking about off-site learning, if you can only unlock the resources, the access, if you can only unlock them on site by physically being near the GPS point, if that's the only way you can unlock it, where's the use and implementation within the school if you're not able to be on site? And with that, we then started to pick up on releasing the code that unlocks everything. So although you don't use the augmented reality part, and you can see from the screenshot here, a view through the camera on the phone, the big blue object that when I tap on it, loads up the picture. Actually, that part of it doesn't work for off-site learning. You want to go straight to the directory of different items, and then you want to load up whatever the item is. So these were considerations that we had to put in right at the start of developing the technology. How will people learn? How will they get to the learning material within this technology so that the technology doesn't become the barrier, but actually the technology enables fun and the more human aspects to be engaged. The narrative, the story that we're putting people in. Are we giving the students some kind of idea about using this app, take on the role of someone exploring this environment for the first time, giving them those elements of the gamified systems that aren't about those simple, just try and get to the end of it, be motivated because otherwise this is a boring task, but rather actually trying to bring that hook, that opportunity for the students to really engage and to connect with the learning. I think that's the key things I wanted to talk through today. I know we're quite a bit short, but we've got the half-hour break for lunch. Is there anything that anyone wants to discuss from what was presented there? From what you've learned
Any comments?
today?
Questions?
I'm just glad we did it to you.
Yeah, they were looking forward to some of your consoles and bits.
Well, what I could do is I could offer that I could pop in. I think it's the 20th of December, isn't it? Is the last date due to my other work. Exactly. I don't know if that's the week off.
Our last lecture's a week before that, I think, apparently. I don't know, I work a week at a time, so you lot know more than me about that.
Yeah, if you're able to come in before the 14th of December, that would be perfect.
I will keep in touch with you about that, Jim, all right?
I'm definitely more than happy, because I can talk you through that. The idea was that the console had a game. It's called Bishy Bashy Special, which is a collection of about 300 tiny little games, right? And the idea of it was to have the focus of the game and in pairs. So this was the implementation. How do you legitimately bring a console into a classroom and have people play and have fun with it? And the idea was you would work in pairs. One person would have the controller and the person beside was guiding you on the instructions of the game. So you were never kind of thrust into it, I don't know what I'm doing. You had that person beside you, but that meant there had to be teamwork and collaboration. So someone couldn't start panicking or shouting at each other. You had to work together. You got two teams of two pairs. And then behind that, you then had the next pairs who are watching over the shoulder, who are observing the different games, observing the communication techniques so that they know what the good practices and the bad practices for when it's their turn to then go in. So actually, it's not about the game. It was about the way that you interact with people under stress of pressure of learning something brand new with technology. But actually, the whole thing just is a bunch of fun. It's intended as a play. So that playful learning that we actually learn also.
No, that's what he's saying. He's not for. There's only one Friday that he's got, but I'll talk to him about it. I think I could learn quite a bit from that approach with my son and his Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
when he's asking me to do things and he loses his temper with me, and then I'm going, just give it here and I'll do it. And yeah. Okay, right.
So we'll see if we can set something, because the assessment period after Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. I will look at that and I will talk to you about it, Jim. So, right, can I say thank you very much for your time.
Is there any questions from people online?
The only questions was when can they play the console stuff.
Thank you so much. Hang on, right, so oh, that's great, Olivia, thank you for that. Right, so a final one. Who enjoyed the Zen clap 1, 2, 3? Oh, a couple of people. Yeah. We definitely have to do it live in class. It's a lot more fun. So you take care, everyone. Have fun. Certainly when it comes to writing up the assignment, try and draw on some fun. Okay?
Thanks, Jim. I'll catch up with you soon. All right.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.